look at your prices with the client view.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
It's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Jennings Executive Search. I had a great conversation with John Jennings about the skills needed in different pricing roles. He and I think a lot alike. If you're looking for a new pricing role, or if you're trying to hire just the right pricing person, I strongly suggest you reach out to Jennings Executive Search. They specialize in placing pricing people. Say that 3 times fast. Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the automatic relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and my mission is to help your company win more business at higher prices. And helping us do that today is Damien Robert. Here are 3 things you want to know about Damien before we start. He is currently the Chief Solution and Delivery Officer at Pricemoov. He's been at SKP for 17 years of his career. That's Simon-Kucher Partners. So he actually understands pricing really well. And by the way, he took a 3-year stint at Disneyland Resorts Paris. Maybe we'll ask him about that too. Welcome, Damien.
Hi, Mark. Nice meeting you.
It's wonderful to meet you too. Hey, how'd you get into pricing in the first place?
Pretty funny. I was an aerospace engineer as a background, but I realized that it might be a bit boring because projects were for something like 7 years. So I decided to join consulting. And end of 2000, basically, internet bubble burst and not so many doors open at that time. And I found a very nice place and a very nice door open, which was Simon-Kucher Partners, a German company that was still growing at that time, despite the crisis. And I entered the door and I realized afterwards it was about pricing. So that's the story. So almost by chance, so to say, but yeah, great, a lot of chance of doing this.
Yeah, I think almost all of us get into pricing by chance, right? Something lucked us into it, and then we realize the power and the fun. So out of curiosity, when I say the word pricing and you say I've been in pricing, what does that mean to you? Right? I mean, it's this huge thing in my mind, but what does it mean to you?
What it means to me is basically, I would say, 2 things. First, pricing is very broad. And what I loved is how central it is in basically because the pricing strategy of a company means basically putting in front of the value delivered by a company, the right product structures, the right pricing, and also all the day-to-day processes to steer this performance. So it's really fun stuff, both strategic and very operational. And at the same time, I found a place where I do find the right balance between quantitative stuff on one side, so where I do use my skills of engineers to model things, and very quantitative stuff. So having to understand the phenomenon, how a consumer is behaving. So finding the right mix between both was like magical for me. So that's what it means to me.
Yeah, I think I agree with you 100% in that price ends up being a number. So it truly is quantitative, and there's lots of reports and studies and analytics we can do, but we also have to think qualitatively, right? We have to think about the people and the way they think and stuff that doesn't come natural to me, at least, and maybe not to you either. So it's kind of fun to learn.
Yeah, it's fun to know that, yeah, somehow pricers are very left-brained to some extent, but consumer, when they buy the product, just the way you feature the price can drive completely different behaviors. So there's even a book on that. Yeah, and it's pretty interesting to read.
Yeah, just one book on that?
No, many books, many books.
Yeah, probably sure. Probably lots. Yeah. Okay, I really want to talk to you about Pricemoov and AI, but before we do that, can you tell me about your experience at Disneyland? Give us a pricing story that we'll enjoy.
So many pricing stories, but just to show you basically how pricing is essential, what we did is a huge segmentation survey as well as pricing survey together to understand how to unlock demand at that time. And what we realized when we did the survey is that families with young kids, so kids below 7, were not coming to the resort from Spain, Italy, UK, because they were waiting for people to be able to do Space Mountain and the full stuff. And based on that, we said, okay, but what if we, just for the celebration of the 15th anniversary, we're offering for free the kids to come? Wouldn't it unlock demand? So we did a research on that. And based on that, we really fully basically communicated everything around 15th anniversary. Kids come for free. It's a present for Mickey and Mouse. And thanks to that, we grew the demand like hell. And basically, really, things and people came 3 years later back again when the kids were old enough basically to do Space Mountain. So it has been very successful. And of course, at the same time, we had pushed prices for adults up so that overall it was balancing. So it was a huge revenue gain thanks to this. So it shows basically how pricing is not only a price, but also the way you message it and what you can achieve. So it has been a huge success, and it was really nice to be there at that time.
Yeah, I think that was brilliant. And so although you didn't change the product per se, you really and truly looked at the market segments as you changed your pricing. What are you going to charge for? Who are you going to charge? How much are you going to charge? And how you communicate it. So that was brilliant. Love that story. Okay, so let's jump into Pricemoov. Tell us, first off, what does Pricemoov do? How did you get involved with them?
So Pricemoov is basically it's a startup that has been created in 2016, which I joined recently, March. So now almost a year ago. And the reason why I joined Pricemoov, it's because they have really great tech guys, great data guys that do offer basically a pricing platform that allows any kind of company basically to optimize their prices. So we are quite different from other pricing software company in the sense that we are hosting all the data through the latest technologies like Snowflake. And basically based on that, you have your product portfolio and pricing, but you can build any kind of pricing strategy on our platform, being very simple. You have some basically pricing rules which are already embedded. And then we can develop for you much more advanced pricing structures. But somehow, if you need a new strategy 2 years later, you can still build it on it. So it's not that you have a price engine which is set in stone, but you have a very evolutive solution. And we have even an SDK approach so that if your company is having data scientists, they can basically develop the strategies by themselves. So it's really an open platform in terms of pricing, where usually you're more buying a price engine and you have something a little bit too much set in stone. So that's a big difference. And we try also to have an interface which makes it much simpler for any kind of user. So if some people in car rental agencies are even able to monitor how their bookings are doing, how competition is doing, and they can by themselves change the prices if they want to. So it allows also very much more less advanced people basically to manage pricing as well. So simplicity and evolutivity, would say, makes us quite different in the market.
Okay, so let's jump back to the very beginning of what you said. I remember back when I first started looking at pricing systems, I was lost, right? I didn't even know I couldn't really describe what it is they do. And so you start talking about what are some different pricing strategies we could implement. Can you give us a couple examples of pricing strategies let's do the simple ones first. So a couple simple pricing strategies that people might be able to implement.
Simple pricing strategies, for example, for an online retailer would be combining basically competition prices and margin information to basically find the right balance. And you would basically already define from the beginning what kind of behaviors you want to be having, depending on how you're positioned and basically versus competition and are your margin levels. So that's one example of basic strategies. Some people want to be even lower than competition more systematically in certain SKUs. So you can have a set of simple strategies like that, and you do apply it basically to your product portfolio, your different locations very easily. And the more advanced one are the classical. We work for CMA CGM, which is basically the large ship operator, large vessels, is the fourth on the market. You have Maersk, the Danish companies, and you have MSC, and then you have CMA CGM. So it's a 30 billion plus revenue company. And based on the filling factor, so are they ahead or are they late in terms of bookings? Based on that, basically, we would make different pricing recommendations in terms of price adjustments. So that's much more advanced. And that would even be considering forecasting methods, demand forecasts, that would be basically supported by machine learning in terms of optimization. So this is what I would consider basically more advanced strategies. So any kind of decision tree approach as well between conversion, traffic information, sales volume, price versus competition would be also quite advanced. Even so, they would still be very transparent, which is something really we like. So something still where you decide and you know what you want in terms of behavior, in terms of pricing behavior.
Pretty fascinating. So if I go back to the first one that we talked about, you're also then collecting somehow competitive pricing information. And in the car rental example, you're even collecting availability of vehicles or competitive.
Yeah, in the case of car rental company, we do basically directly connect with the data from our customers. So they do instantaneously provide us access to availability, to level of bookings from the different segments. So we know basically lively on top of competition information, what is the level of performance, how does it compare to historical data, and this for the different segments. So if you have the corporate segments that are fixed price, but you can still tell them yes or no in terms of bookings. Then you have the classical B2C channel where you have fully dynamic prices. And so we make recommendations basically on prices for the different segments and availability in our engine.
Yeah. Okay. So when we talk about fully dynamic pricing, then we're talking about your software setting the prices. Is that correct?
Our software allowing you to configure the rules that we do provide. So you have a set of rules, you do yourself decide which one you want to use and implement basically for your product portfolio, because you may want to use one or another one. And we can basically train you on which one you want to use.
Right. And so I could, as in the rental car example you gave earlier, I could change the price because I'm seeing what's going on. Or I could have set up a set of rules where you're just automatically changing the price for me and I don't have to worry about it. Nice.
Exactly. And this, when you have 200 or when you have 300 agencies and you have only 2 people to do that, you need to implement rules. You cannot do it by yourself. So you are somehow setting the rules, and then you will receive alerts if there are specific situations where it's even going out of the road and you should be considering and watching specifically those states.
Yeah. So real quickly, define AI and ML for us, and then I'm going to ask another hard question.
Sure. and that's very interesting because this is also what I always do when I want to explain to people what ML can do and cannot do. And basically what I usually say is that historically, when you wanted to define a model, you had to run analysis. And based on those analyses, statistical analysis, you were understanding a phenomenon. And based on this understanding of the phenomenon, you were deriving a model. And this is how I want to change things based on this model. What machine learning brings is that because you have so much computational capabilities, you can directly fit a model to your extensive number of inputs and try to fit this based on live data and retrain the model very frequently. And this can be much more granular thanks to that. If you have a neural network, you have a model which is weighting different models. So you are able to be very, very granular. If you have a random forest, same thing. Even so, you don't have all data because you have different decision trees working and being trained on a subset of variables and a subset of data. Even so, you don't have all the data, you are able to still find a recommendation. So this is really what machine learning brings.
Okay, so pause for just a second. When I did my dissertation at Berkeley, I created statistical models using scanner panel data from grocery stores. And I was trying to figure out whether 9 cents works and how it works in making people's decisions. So I had to create different equations, different models, and test the fits of those models. Now, what you're saying with machine learning is I would never have created the models. The software itself is essentially creating the model. Is that true?
No, that's a little bit where people don't always understand it, is that you could try basically to, if you could define exactly for simple things that does work, basically like this. So if you want to identify if words are positive or negative, this is how it works. If you're trying to do something much more complex, you still need to build an architecture, as somehow the machine learning and the model will try to optimize this skeleton. And then, yes, they will give you an answer automatically, much more easily. But you still need a kind of build this skeleton if you want it to be successful. And that's a bit what people misunderstand sometimes in machine learning and artificial intelligence. They think that the model by itself can be smart. The real is that the model is not smart, but the model can be much more granular and fit much more kind of situations because there is this granularity, and that the computer allows basically to have so many computations and so many different alternatives. Where in your case, you need to take an assumption of what is the structure, and you had much less basically situations that you could model somehow. So it brings more granularity. It does work even so you don't have all data, but it is not really good enough to solve a complex problem. And there is not like the magic wand button on your picture to make the picture looks better. Some people still think, let's press the price button and that would work. That doesn't work.
Okay, so there still has to be intelligence, structure, design around all the machine learning and AI we put in. Tell me, I can just picture people saying, yes, but it's a black box. I don't know where that price came from. How do you address that in the world of machine learning?
In this world, for example, I did work for a ferry company. And for this ferry company, what we did is we splitted the model into two pieces. One of the critical input is basically the demand forecast. And on this demand forecast side, basically, we identified the right variables. So how late are we since 1 week, 4 weeks, 1 day, since the opening of the sales? You build the right variables. And by training the model basically on this, you get the right forecast. So it is good at basically building the right forecast. But then about the pricing, the decision tree about pricing is a fully transparent model where one of the first dimension that you consider is how is going to be my occupancy level. This is considering a machine learning input, which is forecast, but taking it into a transparent decision tree, which afterwards look at how is conversion. If conversion is good, it shows that maybe your price too low. If conversion is very bad, maybe your price too high. Then you consider also the last dimension, which is competition pricing. So machine learning is one input, but the decision tree is transparent. And if I have to give one example, which I frequently use, it's a Tesla. Why a Tesla? Because basically machine learning and AI are used to take all the information from the different sensors to know if there is an obstacle or not. But afterwards, all the interpretation to say, is the obstacle moving? Is the obstacle on the road? And should I drive left or right? It's a fully transparent model. An engineer, an automotive engineer, has designed basically where to go. And pricing is the same. Machine learning can be used to optimize part of the dimension, some of the inputs, but basically at the end of the day, you need a skeleton of decision making, which is important to have. Otherwise, you do not take the long-term impact of price changes. You do not take potential competition reaction. So you're missing a lot of the points.
Okay, so I think I understand what you just said. And I think what you said was, we're going to use machine learning to forecast the results of decisions that we make. And so if I change the price from $1 to $1.20, I can forecast what I think is going to happen. And machine learning will help us get to that forecast. But I still have to make the
This
decision to go from $1 to $1.20.
somehow, yes, exactly. But it is, when I was saying forecast, was a forecast of the demand or the forecast of how the consumer should react. But based on that, do you want the automation to change the price or not? You
Yep.
still have a transparent decision making.
Right. So I could still write
And
rules that say,
it can still be automated, but basically it's with a transparent rule.
okay, awesome. Let me tell you a quick story that happened to me 7 years ago now, and I just want to hear what you have to say. I wrote my very first book was called Impact Pricing, and I looked online. I'd gotten letters from my publisher saying, "Hey, we're out of print," and I said, "That's fine. I'm not going to pay you to print more books. I don't really care." And then I watched on Amazon, and the price of my book, which is normally a $20 book, was at $225. And I was convinced that that's because of automation. And so just for fun, I had 50 books here in my office. So I built my own Amazon store and put them back up on the market for $25. And I just watched that $225 price walk back down. It was pretty fascinating. So what do you think happened?
I think it's very interesting. I haven't worked at Amazon, but at least the initial one has been that the model couldn't find basically any rational or any change in volume basically following the price change, but there was probably not enough volume change so that they can interpret anything, or they were doing some price testing with your book. I don't know exactly what was they were making. But then when they did realize basically that there was another book at $25, and I don't know if they had access to your sales, right? At that time, they did understand, basically, they understood that there was another case and there were higher revenues made being at $25. And based on that, they took the decision to follow and go further to your price. But I have no clue. I'm just guessing here. So, but maybe you have the response.
No. I think it's just a guess. I would guess the same. I don't think it was Amazon people making decisions. I think it was companies who had Amazon stores, and they were running some type of software automation, and it looked exactly like you said, where they looked and said, "Look, there's no volume change when we change price. Let's keep raising it until there's a volume change."
What I can just tell you is that I've been working for a theme park that was basically which is operating in Orlando. And basically there is one which is smaller than the other one that has fixed capacity. And basically they had, and I was working as consultant at that time, and they had basically said yes to a software provider, fully AI ML based, zero pricing expertise. And that has told them, okay, we will put that in place and we'll take a part of the revenue increase that you will get from us. And all of a sudden, the prices started basically to go up, even though the sales were not good. And basically, we asked the people, but why is it so? What's happening? Why is the model telling us to increase the rates? And they told us, we don't know. That's the model. And the only way out has been to unplug the model, and they went back home. So that just tells you that if the model is fully black box, I fully understand the first comment you were making. And there was really no backbone in terms of decision making of based on which parameters, which data is taken into consideration. One is predicting the demand, another one is making the decision on pricing itself. So then we put something back, a more rational approach, and it did work. So just to tell you, black box does exist.
Yeah. So I think it's, I really like the idea that says we still have to have people thinking through what pricing decisions we're going to make. Does it make sense or not, and how to make those. So I approve of that.
I even so think, I don't know if you're the same in the US, but in Europe, they are really strong. They really look strongly as, is there any companies that are aligning on pricing? And if you start having something which is completely black box, how can you prove that your algorithm did not agree with the other algorithm to make prices go up? And there has been something in Europe where car rental players were using the same company basically to make pricing decisions on spare parts. And you know what? The algorithm were really going into the same direction. So I think that it's very important to prove that there is an engine, there is a software, but there are human beings deciding how to set up the software. And basically they have to be quite independent still on that. So that's also the beauty of having one platform where still the pricers and the product owners decide how they set up prices.
Nice. So let's talk about the last topic I want to bring up. We're running out of time. How do you think about customer perceived value when you create these models?
That's a very complex one in terms of putting rules. What we do, at least on this, is we take that into consideration on one first module, which is a price building module, which is setting the rules between SKUs. Because in reality, we do not optimize all SKUs independently. We decide that some SKUs will be related to the other one. So for example, if you have different sizes of bottles for the same drink, basically there will be still some indexation happening on that. Same thing on some other products, packaging, or sometimes the different SKUs are just a different colors or the different version somehow. And then thanks to that, basically, when we do optimize the price points which are free, then all the other price points keep the consistency. So that's one dimension where we take that into consideration. The second is that even in the pricing rules, we put basically boundaries. So there is a way to say, you start from this price, but never go up than this price and never go below this price. So we take into consideration psychological thresholds. And so the model has the freedom to evolve within those thresholds. So that's the second dimension where we take that into consideration. And also in the frequency of price change, you can define how frequently you're accepting to change prices, because there are also some businesses where you know that you don't want the price to change every single minute or every hour, because it would drive too much stress on a very high price product. You would never do it. So that's another dimension that we take into consideration. It's not perfect, but that's how we do it.
Yeah, so it's those are actually mostly psychological aspects that you built into the model, which is kind of interesting.
Exactly.
Nice. Damien, this has been fantastic. We're gonna have to wrap it up though. Last question. What's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Look at your prices with the client view. Don't look just as a price list, but think about what they see really on the website, what they see on their price list, what they see in their contract, and look at it with their eyes, because very frequently you just optimize a set of price, but you do not check the consistency, you do not realize some of the price points, and you would even realize that the way your prices are featured on the web is sometimes a catastrophe. So really just look at the end of the tunnel and look at it, because you would have a lot of surprise, especially on promotion. On promotion, 50% of promotional failures are usually related to execution. It's not at all related to the design of the promotion itself. So that would be my piece of advice.
I could buy that completely. Just put yourself in the customer's shoes and look back at your pricing. What are they seeing? Exactly. And does it make sense or not? So,
yeah.
Damien, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Let's go on LinkedIn and message me. I would be super happy to respond to you.
Okay, I will have the link to his LinkedIn page in the show notes. Episode 158 is all done. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? Those are very valuable to us. And if you have any questions or comments about this podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact. Thanks again to Jennings Executive Search for sponsoring our podcast. If you're looking to hire someone in pricing, I suggest you contact someone who knows pricing people. Contact Jennings Executive Search.